Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the channel for another Ultimate Alliance 3 video. We've made it. We're here. Today we are focusing on the final Gauntlet run within the third phase of the Curse of the Vampire DLC. We are taking on the level 120 Condition Terminal Gauntlet, which is an extensive gauntlet run with 10 different segments. So strap in, because this is going to be a bit of a doozy, but we're going to walk you through each and every segment and what you need to be aware of. Segment number 1 is actually pretty straightforward. It's just the fight right off the start of the main story quest, with the added quirk of there being a couple of cursed elements in there, mainly with the end fight against Ronan, and the enemies that you face off against are going to be dealing some increased damage. Personal tip, don't waste your time fighting these guys on the staircase. It's not going to add any more time to anything. You just want to get to this core and break it down as quickly as possible. You'll see here that even though I do tend to run Thanos Infinite a little bit more consistently, at this stage I'm just ignoring that completely and laying into the core with a synergy attack from Wolverine and Miles Morales until it bursts, then switching back over to Thanos Infinite to get right on into the next stretch. You do not want to be wasting your time with enemies here, because odds are, yes, you will be able to take them out, but you're going to need all the help you can get for this fight here against Ronan, because he has a cursed attribute that is going to cause you to gravitate into him, and that tends to be a little problematic because his attacks swing in a very wide arc out in front of him, as well as the attacks themselves having a large area of effect, whether that's the swings of his hammer or the charge attacks that he has with his lightning and thunder strikes, or the sweeping arcs which cannot be blocked out across the front of him, and those charge attacks that you see him doing. He's a very problematic character, but as long as you are cautious, you should be able to take him on with little to no difficulty, because even though the opponents that you're facing off against are dealing increased damage, the members of your team are also dealing that increased damage, so that tends to help quite a bit as well. And this is the last little bit of the run that you need to focus on in terms of moving on and getting through. Just make sure that you're keen on your dodge and roll techniques, otherwise you're going to have a lot of deaths here. Now, deaths aren't that big of a concern in this run of the Gauntlet, as typically you have a finite resource of amount of times you are allowed to revive. In this one, you've basically got an infinite pool. I mean, you don't. The finite number is 99 revives. But you don't want to burn through those any quicker than you absolutely have to. The second section of this gauntlet involves a 3-staged fight against Nebula, Mystique, and then Proxima Midnight. This one, the bosses tend to hit a little bit harder as normal as well. They also have the cursed attributes present with them, and you've just seen how hard some of these opponents are hitting, because we just lost Wolverine and Miles Morales. But it's not the end of the world, because as I mentioned, there's a lot of revives that you have available to you within this phase of the gauntlet there. Just like that, we have Nebula taken down. Nebula does have that freeze attribute active on her, so she can be a little bit problematic. Mystique is, I think, the most annoying of the 3 bosses that you have to fight in this leg of the gauntlet, because she has that poison attribute. But with a little bit of careful planning with your attacks, especially if you have abilities that do not rely on direct contact, you can take her out pretty easily. And as soon as you have Mystique taken out, you will be confronted by the third and final boss of this section, which is Proxima Midnight. And she's difficult for different reasons, mainly because she tends to teleport around the arena quite a bit. But as you get a feel for her, you can certainly take her on and clear out this section of that gauntlet. And the nice thing about this as well is whenever you have those cursed attributes affecting members of the team, you will notice that you can actually determine where they're going to go, because that attribute is going to follow them around. So it's less of a guessing game as to where Proxima Midnight is going to end up, as it typically is in the vanilla version of the story quest, as she very much telegraphs her movement with the tracking that you can do on her with that cursed attribute following her around. So while we wait on this fight to finish up, we're going to go over, of course, the first 2 clear conditions here. And you can actually get these two within the first, your first clear of this gauntlet. Of course, the first one, which unlocks an alternate costume for Morbius, that is acquired by beating all 10 stages of that gauntlet without, failing it. As long as you get through the 10 different stages, you're going to get that clear reward. And the second criteria is defeating 280 enemies. I skipped over a lot of the enemies in some of these sections where they are non-mandatory, but there are definitely 280 enemies within those 10 sections that you can take out. We are now on to Section 3, which is a fight against MODOK. MODOK has the Cursed attribute outright, where if you stand too close to him for an extended period of time, you will gain the infection, which is both helpful and harmful for the purposes of this fight. Though it is beneficial that you have with this fight the ability to rattle off your extreme attacks at an accelerated rate as they charge and are used a lot more efficiently. Especially where the mastery set that I tend to run allows me to recuperate large amounts of my health upon my extreme attack detonations. So I'm really not too concerned about losing any of my team members in this section of the fight. He can be a little bit annoying because as MODOK gets into the second phase of this fight, the extreme attack from Thanos Infinite actually does not work on him, where generally you can activate your extreme attack right on top of him and immediately stagger him out. He is, for whatever reason, immune to that, and as you saw here, MODOK has the terrible habit of running away from you as you tend to activate those up. He has that dash attack that can take him clear to the other side of the arena, and that's just annoying for everyone involved. But because Thanos Infinite's heavy attack is by far the best heavy attack in the game, you can actually drastically increase the recharge rate, which you already have for the members of your team, and the extreme attacks that you have to levy them off. Also, I was unaware that Thanos could get knocked out of his extreme attack startup there, but apparently that is the case, and this is really the only place that I've ever seen that come to fruition. Moving right along into Section 4, we have a timed trial run where we need to defeat Miles Morales, Spider-Gwen, and Miss Marvel. But the caveat with this is you can regain time onto your timer by clearing out different enemies and taking out different enemies here. And you also have the added benefit of some Sentinels showing up, which actually make a lot of these sections getting into that final fight against those 3 mini-boss characters a lot easier. As you see, we have just taken out that Sentinel, and we can then use that core to immediately detonate on the artifacts that allow us to progress into the next story quest here. So we've taken out the Flame artifact. This next section has the Ice artifact and the Electricity artifact as well. We're going to employ a very similar strategy of taking out the mindless ones that are hanging out over here, then shifting our attention to the Sentinels that are scattered about. And as soon as we have a core available, we can run over to the Electrical artifact, which is on a pedestal over here to the right. And generally you need to climb up to the top of it to combat with it directly, but what I actually end up doing here is I leap up and then throw the core to detonate around the artifact. That takes it out in one shot, which clears up the final portal and opens up the path to the final artifact, which is the Ice one that is located over here. And just like that, we have it taken out, so we don't need to hang out here any longer. We can jump right on down to the final section. And this is kind of what I meant when I was talking about defeating 280 enemies earlier, because I'm skipping by a lot of these different enemies that I could be defeating to count towards that body count. But my main priority here is finishing out these 3 mini-bosses and getting through this as succinctly as I can. You can take out the different artifacts that are running around if they're causing you trouble, but it's not a part of the main objective for finishing out this fight. You'll see here with Thanos' ability attack there, we have Kamala Khan taken down, we have Miles Morales taken out, and Spider-Gwen did manage to run away from us when we were initiating that attack, but we are now barreling down on top of her, and we have that section cleared out now as well. Which brings us to my least favorite mini-boss fight of all time, which is a fight against KLAW. And not only is it a fight against KLAW, but it's very much like the first phase of this Gauntlet run, where he has increased attack damage, and that is problematic because this arena is very small, and KLAW hits very hard, even harder than he normally does, and there's not a whole lot of places that you can hide from his attacks. So the stratagem that I'm employing here is detonating as many of my extreme attacks as I can to take advantage of the extreme attack invulnerability on that startup, and then laying into him with a couple of Thanos Infinite's main attacks here. And as KLAW bounces around off the walls here, you get hit by him once or twice, and you're just done and down for the count. But we've just about got him finished out, and even though I don't like the nature of this fight for what it is, we are able to rip through it rather quickly. And on to the 6th segment of this Gauntlet run, which is going to be the fight that initially I thought was a requirement of the main story quest of taking out Mystique, Juggernaut, and Magneto, except this time around, you actually get to do that. And this is similar to the fight with MODOK, where you are dealing increased damage to the opponents which you interact with through your extreme attacks only, and have an accelerated recharge of that as you do so as well. The attributes that are active on Mystique, Juggernaut, and Magneto are: Mystique has that electrical field around her, Juggernaut has the effect that will heal portions of the damage you deal to him back to him, making him a little bit more difficult to take down, and Magneto has a large field of effect that will slow your movement while you are within his vicinity. Though you do want to keep in mind that anytime you have these characters staggered out, you will not have to worry about the effects as they do dissipate until they regain their stamina in their stagger. So honestly, what this is it just becomes a sequence of rinsing and repeating a lot of your attacks to build up your extreme gauge, which is done very quickly with the nature of this fight in general. You'll see there that we were able to not only take out the 3 enemies all at the same time, but refill our extreme attack gauges at the same time to release those in pretty rapid succession there. Almost always you're going to take out Mystique first because she has such a lower health pool to take on, and that is a general suggestion for the main story quest as well. If you do want to take on that challenge of defeating those characters, you're not meant to be able to, but you can if that's something that you desire to attempt, as Mystique is going to be your best target in that section of the combat fight. I typically resort to just throwing that fight when we're going through the main story quest, unless I'm doing the new game percent, in which case I have the resources to take him down. I do make the choice to detonate 1 extreme attack at a time here against Magneto at the end, because I'd like to be able to conserve my extreme attacks wherever possible going into the next fight, because it's always nice to have extreme attacks on hand. And you will notice that the one that I decided to hold on to was the extreme attack for Thanos Infinite, because his is so useful with the additional attacks that it has. And that very much holds true here with the startup of this fight, because there are 5 mini-bosses you need to take out in the 7th section of this gauntlet. It starts out with a duel fight against a cursed Colossus, who will give the infection to members of your team as you stay near them, and a Cyclops, who has the field of effect that will heal enemies that are within his range. So that can be a little bit problematic, though it's not overpowered to the point where it is unbalanced. And again, anytime you take them down, you will deactivate that aura, so it really tends to help out quite a bit with that as well. Cyclops is a little bit more annoying in regards to he bounces around the arena and throws out a lot of attacks that cover a large amount of area. Colossus, his main frustration is with the fact that he hits very hard and likes to get right up in your face, and even has a couple of abilities that will keep you and prevent you from actually doing anything noteworthy to him, as he will stagger you out of your ability startups. we've just about got these two characters down, and as soon as we do have these two defeated, we will actually have the remaining 3 mini-bosses that spawn in all at the same time. Took advantage of some of my teammates being otherwise occupied with their extreme attacks there to revive up some of the other team members that I had down. And with Cyclops taken out, we've just got to finish out Colossus. He is now staggered out, and with a couple of final heavy attacks from Thanos Infinite here, we have him taken down, which then cures the infected members of the arena, and it sparks the final 3 mini-bosses, which is Iron Man, Captain America, and Wolverine. And with these 3 characters, they all have that cursed attribute where you just ridded yourself of that infection, but you're going to get it right back, as they are all going to be in a very close proximity to you, which is actually kind of helpful with helping to retain some of your health with these different opponents as you seek to fight against them. As you saw there, Thanos Infinite was getting pretty low, but we were able to get him back to about 50% health with a couple of his dash ability attacks there. And we will want to revive up Miles Morales once we have a chance to do so. Though one important note that I haven't really ever noted on is if you have a team member that goes down or becomes incapacitated and you revive them, they do revive back up without the cursed effects affecting them. Though in this case, as soon as we do revive them, we are very quickly going to receive that curse back, or that infection back, because of the opponents that we're facing off against. You're going to have close proximity with them. Really, the only ones that you can remotely hope to get away with that is anyone who focuses in almost uniquely projectile attacks, such as Hawkeye or Elsa Bloodstone. We are now into the 8th section of this gauntlet, which involves a fight against a cursed Morbius. And in order to get cursed Morbius to spawn in, you have to take out some of these demons, which are also cursed. There are 3 of them hanging out, one that spawns right in the middle of the arena, and then the other 2 are off to both the left and right hand sides. As soon as you take the 3 of them out, you will have Morbius spawned in to torment you as well. So we're just going to finish a couple of these final enemies and opponents here. And now that we have the 3 of them taken down, Morbius is going to spawn in and cause us a little bit more of a headache. Now, with this section of the fight, especially where we have Thanos Infinite on our team, I do go ahead and detonate all of my extreme attacks. I detonated Miles is a little bit too far away from the fight to actually be beneficial. I should have been a little bit more cautious when detonating that and brought him closer to the fray to get max efficiency out of that attack. But it's still pretty helpful in terms of its overall attack damage and range. So we managed to get some benefit from it at the end of the day. We now just need to focus on Morbius and getting him down, which is going to be pretty straightforward. You just got to keep in mind that Morbius is quite slippery and likes to jet around the arena and can be a little bit problematic as you try to track him down as well. And while we let the remainder of this fight fall through, the 3rd clear condition that we need to touch on is earning a score of 1 million. You will not be able to complete that in one run, despite there being 10 different segments to this gauntlet. That being said, you should be easily able to obtain that score with 2 runs through this gauntlet, and you're going to need to do that anyway because of the 4th clear condition, which is defeating 81 bosses. And that sounds like a lot, because in reality it actually is, especially when you take into consideration that in a single run of that gauntlet you can only take out 27 mini bosses, and if you do a little bit of math, 27 by 3, that equates to 81, so you need to do 3 complete runs of this gauntlet in order to get that last clear condition. And the majority of those mini bosses that you need to take down actually come in these last 2 fights. This is section number 9, which starts with a fight against just some standard grunts with the curse attributes and a couple of the other curses of the vampire present. But as soon as you have those opponents taken down, you will be met by the remainder of the Marvel Knights, which is Punisher, Moon Knight, and Blade. So you want to take them out as quickly as you can, and similar to the fight that we saw earlier, again, that's a terrible detonation of Miles' extreme attack, so please ignore that that happened. But with these different characters that come in, they also have the cursed attribute to them, which will lead your team to regain that infection, even though you've just rid yourself of it with the previous opponents that you've taken out. But they don't have any other really detrimental attacks that you need to keep in mind. They tend to be about on par with the attacks that they're doing, though I do have the sneaking suspicion that as you loop back through these gauntlets, they do gradually increase in the damage that they're doing. So it can be a little bit more problematic, but as long as you're keeping on top of your team members that are down and reviving them where and when needed, you're not going to run out of the revives, because again, you've got 99 of them to spend, and I would be appalled if you used all 99 or even half of them as getting your 3 runs through this gauntlet to claim the full rewards. As you can see here, I'm getting a little bit lower than I'd probably like to on revives, but we're going to finish out this run with over 85 revives still available for our usage. And just like that, we have Moon Knight down and out of the way, which brings us to the final confrontation of this gauntlet run, which is actually my favorite of the gauntlets that we've ran so far, because it starts with a fight against Thanos, and that's the same Thanos that you fight at the end of the story quest before taking on Thane. And you will need to run him out as quickly as you can, because he has that cursed attribute to him, which is ideal if you can get that taken away before, or as quickly as you can. And it's ideal if you can take him down as quickly as you can, because, well, you're not going to want to hang out too long with that curse wearing down the members of your team, because as soon as you have him taken down, you will actually have all 4 of the DLC characters from this chapter spawning in to cause you some grief. And they have a couple of attributes that make them a little bit difficult to fight. There's going to be Outriders that come in with different effects, such as the self-heal, the ice, the poison, and it just makes things an all-around mess. But if you focus on Morbius and take him down as quickly as you can, you will be able to bypass the secondary products of these fights and trigger these characters to gain their cursed attributes before they are taken out and respawn back in. So you have Moon Knight, who has that poison attribute to him. You have Punisher, who has that flame attribute to him. And I know Blade has an attribute, but he went down so fast there I honestly didn't notice what it was, as Blade, I think, is a little bit weaker when it comes to the opponents that you're taking on. Once you have those 4 opponents cleared out, you will have Infinite Armor Thane, who pops in, and he has that ability that drags you in, or that curse that drags you into him as you seek to fight with him. And that can be a little problematic with Thanos Infinite, because there's a very select amount of times that you're going to be able to take full advantage of your fully charged abilities, because, well, Thane has a lot of attacks that will nullify you out of those startups, whether it's knocking you down or encasing you in amber, or really any of the different attacks that he has. You see that he's got Wolverine encased in amber just there, which is a little bit problematic in terms of damage output. But apart from that, you've really just got to layer into Thane as frequently as you can, and be aware that when he freezes time like that, there's little to no time to roll away from it, unless you have impeccable timing and you're not in the middle of a animation of throwing out an attack. But as Thane finishes out here, as he is going to go down as we continue to layer in ability and heavy attacks here, that is going to do it for the Curse of the Vampire DLC Gauntlet runs. We will be continuing this series into the Rise of Phoenix Gauntlets, and that series is going to start for you on Friday. So thanks again for watching. If you found this video helpful and informative, feel free to give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more daily content. And with that being said, I hope that you have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day.